this week's Vaticano, Pope Francis celebrates Mass for the feast of Pentecost, the birthday of the Church. Elsewhere in Rome, faithful receive a shower of rose petals for the same occasion. The Marian month of May comes to an end, and we revisit Our Lady of Fatima's call for conversion. All this, plus a church historian explains what happened to the canons of the Pope's castle, Castel Sant'Angelo. Stay tuned now for Vaticano. In red vestments symbolizing the fire of the Holy Spirit, Pope Francis celebrated Mass on Pentecost Sunday in St. Peter's Basilica. The feast recalls the descent of the Holy Spirit upon the apostles. It's also sometimes seen as the birthday of the Church. And the Pope focused on the work of the Holy Spirit in his homily.
Il mondo ha bisogno di uomini e donne non chiusi.
The world needs men and women who are not closed in on themselves, but filled with the Holy Spirit. Closing oneself off from the Holy Spirit means not only a lack of freedom, it's a sin. There are many ways one can close oneself off from the Holy Spirit: by selfishness for one's own gain, by rigid legalism seen in the attitude of the doctors of the law, to whom Jesus referred to as hypocrites, by neglect of what Jesus taught, by living the Christian life not as service to others but in the pursuit of personal interests, and in so many other ways. However, the world needs the courage, hope, faith, and perseverance of Christ's followers. The world needs the fruits, the gifts of the Holy Spirit, as St. Paul lists them: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control.
Fedeltà, mitezza, dominio di sé.
After Mass, Francis prayed the Regina Coeli in St. Peter's Square. He once again spoke of letting the Holy Spirit act in one's life.
Come quel giorno di Pentecoste,
On the day of Pentecost, the Holy Spirit is poured out continuously, even today on the Church and on all of us, because we go out of our mediocrity and the closing off of ourselves, and communicate to the world the merciful love of the Lord. This is our mission.
misericordioso del Signore. Questa è la nostra missione.
On Pentecost Sunday, the Easter season comes to a close and the Church's liturgical calendar returns again to what is called Ordinary Time. The Pantheon in Rome, nearly 2,000 years old, one of the world's longest standing monuments, with its reinforced solid concrete dome at 142 feet in diameter. It was once a place dedicated to worshiping pagan gods. Since the 7th century, it's a church dedicated to St. Mary and the martyrs. But that's not the only thing that attracts visitors. Something original, beautiful, and spectacular happens during Mass, held here every year on Pentecost. At the end of the Mass, petals of 10,000 red roses are dropped from the roof's open circle. They're all kept in large bags by firemen, who climb to the top and wait for the signal. When the priest gives the final blessing at the end of Mass, the shower of petals are cast down on the faithful inside the Pantheon. A total of 40,000 to 60,000 petals, each symbolizing a flame of the Holy Spirit. Benedict XVI was known as the Green Pope for his attention to the environment. The Vatican actually eliminated its carbon footprint under his watch. Now Pope Francis is taking it a step further. Among other work, he's writing an encyclical letter on safeguarding creation. It's due out for release this summer. Cardinal Peter Turkson is advising him on it. From his post as the Pope's Minister for Justice and Peace, he says business leaders need to understand that caring for the environment doesn't mean hurting business prospects.
Is to encourage people to recognize that instead of saying this is a threat, let's say it's a challenge. And if it's a challenge, then we invited also to consider the opportunities that may derive from this type of shift. And that's what this conference is all about. It's to encourage the world of business to recognize that in whatever climate change is about and all of that, it also offers opportunities for growth, new chances, new opportunities for business.
According to this American cardinal, the voice of the Catholic Church must guide the global discussion of the dynamic between the environment and economic growth.
There are roles for the government to set policy. There's a role for business and all of its genius and enterprise to bring about development. But all of that has to be done within a moral framework, and it's the role of the church, the task of the church, to provide that moral guidance. Help people understand that the issues we're dealing with are able to be dealt with in a way that satisfies the needs of everyone.
The event the cardinals were taking part in aimed to nurture this discussion of economic growth and environmental sustainability. They also examined practical aspects of upending what Pope Francis calls a throwaway culture. One speaker said that new business opportunities can arise precisely from finding new ways to avoid creating waste.
So if you think about those technologies, the digital, the biotechnology and material sciences, we can dramatically reduce waste. I think it is a moral as well as an economic obligation to build economic systems that reduce waste, that cut the food waste in our society, which accounts for over a third of what we produce in the world, is either lost before it ever reaches the plate or is wasted and thrown away. We can design technologies that cut the waste through the entire value chain.
The environment and its care is expected also to be on the Pope's mind as he travels to the global business leader, the United States, in September.
We're excited about the Pope's visit, and one of the things he's going to see when he comes to Washington is a slice of the world. Looking out at the congregation, looking out at the faithful, the Church of Washington, he'll see the face of the planet. And I think what he will speak to us about is going to recognize that and challenge us to care for one another.
One thing is sure, when the Pope publishes the encyclical, the world will be paying attention.
During the meditation of his general audience, Pope Francis focused on the Christian concept of courtship and dating.
El matrimonio como vocación de Dios no es solo una relación.
Marriage, as a vocation of God, is not only a relationship based on attraction and feeling, but establishes such a strong and lasting partnership, making two lives one, a miracle of human freedom and the grace of God. Such an alliance is not established overnight. Dating creates favorable conditions for men and women to know each other thoroughly, to ripen in the responsible decision about something so great that you cannot buy or sell. For the consumer, culture of waste, everything is immediate. This sentiment prevails in our society and often tends to turn love into an object of consumption, which cannot form the basis of a vital commitment.
De un compromiso vital.
Welcome back. This is Vaticano.
The month of May comes to an end. Many Marian shrines around the world had special pilgrimages during what's known as the Month of Mary. Soldiers praying for peace is not something that you'd expect, yet at Lourdes they took over. This man came along with a group of Ukrainian soldiers to ask for the intercession of the Mother of God and for her protection. I'm here with 20 people, 17 soldiers, 2 chaplains, and 1 military bishop. Most of our military school came here as a preparation for a military operation in the Ukraine to receive a blessing. The most important thing that we can do in the military chaplaincy is to support the soldiers, to be behind them in the territory of conflict, and to give every support that we can give. Many military service members were on their annual pilgrimage to the Marian Shrine 70 years after World War II ended. It was the so-called Warriors to Lourdes pilgrimage, which lasts from May 12th through 18th. It is very important to us because we feel very supported by the whole world. We want to show the world that we have a war in the Ukraine at this moment. We are here to pray for peace in the Ukraine. All 20 people who came here and all the people in the Ukraine hope and pray for peace now. It's our goal to be close to the Virgin, to have peace in the Ukraine.
The conflict in the Ukraine is not over. The Church and its chaplains are still needed.
The root of the conflict of Ukraine is not religious. Probably they know that there are people who are in difficult situations because they are not Orthodox but Catholic, but the root of the conflict is not religious. The Church supports the people who go to church, and the Church is still in the zone of the conflict. They did not leave the territory, but they stay there to help the people.
The annual event in Lourdes also brings together military personnel from all over. This year, pilgrims included the Swiss Guard and both active duty and retired American military personnel, including veterans who have been wounded while on the military tours.
This month, the 68th session of the World Health Assembly at the UN in Geneva took place. In light of the current disastrous Ebola outbreak, the Assembly discussed what lessons can be learned and how urgently the international community needs to act when crises strike. On Monday, May 18th, the Director General of the World Health Organization, Dr. Margaret Chan, announced improvements.
I am establishing a global health emergency workforce, and I'm strengthening our core and surge capacity of trained emergency response staff. If the world really wants to improve health, it can do so, no matter what the odds.
Later that morning, German Chancellor Angela Merkel arrived to address the Assembly. She declared, "The health of one person is also the health of others, and the human right to health can only be enforced if a sustainable health system is in place or is put in place in every country on earth."
There's an ancient proverb that says you should learn before you speak and take care of yourself before you fall ill. Some words lose none of their wisdom even over thousands of years. Health is a human right. We are all working now and in September to ensure that the right to health is firmly anchored in the UN system as one of the new Sustainable Development Goals.
On Wednesday, May 20th, the Holy See delegation from Rome, led by His Excellency Archbishop Zygmunt Zimowski, delivered his intervention to the World Health Assembly.
Unfortunately, in most low-income countries, many health centers are unable to provide safely the service needed, as they lack staff, medicines, equipment, and health information. As Pope Francis reminds us, persons and peoples ask for justice to be put into practice, not only in a legal sense, but also in terms of contribution and distribution.
The teaching of the Catholic Church that is for a just approach to these issues, of sensitive attention to the neediest and the most vulnerable groups of society, is one of the starting points for really changing, improving, and strengthening the health delivery in the countries of the world that are in a development phase.
According to Archbishop Tomasi, the concerns expressed in this assembly are responded in a very effective and efficient way by a variety of Catholic-inspired organizations and institutions who make an important contribution to the development of universal health systems. The 68th World Health Assembly gave the World Health Organization the green light to reform emergency and response programs.
As world leaders turn their attention to the post-2015 Sustainable Development Goals, these women gathered in Rome last week to address how women's issues will be considered in the debate.
We take
the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the UN as a basis and concentrate ourselves on two aspects: the cultural and educative elements, since we want to oppose gender ideology. It destroys the family, which is the marriage of one man and one woman, and destroys society. And we want to underscore that the fight against poverty, which is seen in the first goal, cannot be achieved without actively fighting against the womb for rent, surrogate motherhood. This is a new slavery. It is the violation of the woman and children. We ask that this womb for rent be opposed everywhere. There is no doubt that the womb for rent is in direct connection with gay partnerships and with artificial fertilization. These are all issues that manipulate life.
Sono tutti temi connessi che manipolano la vita.
Dr. Wilma Carvalho is working in the medical field in India, and she sees firsthand the abuse that surrogacy implies.
Today it is a booming business, and it's become very commercial with almost $400 million involved. There are 3,000 centers in all of India, but the main centers are in Bhopal and in Anand in Gujarat, the place where our Prime Minister comes from, Gujarat. And it is very, very dangerous. It has many pitfalls, it has many limitations. The woman should be between 18 to 34 years. She should have no medical problems. She should have a child of her own. And of course, she should agree to the contract, which many of them, being illiterate, don't even know what they're signing up for.
Since 2002, India has accepted the practice because of the big dividends.
About it being stigmatized, initially it was, but now when they realize the money involved, they say that they could earn that money in 15 years being servants. So they prefer in one shot to help them to build a house for the education of their children. They go in for it. But many do not realize that there are many pitfalls. So one of them is recently the couple divorced, so they refused the child, and then the child didn't have a citizenship of India, nor did Japan agree to accept the child, so it was given a temporary entry permit. The case is still going on. If we play God, it comes back on us, so it's better not to interfere. I do believe that.
Pope Francis sent a message to the women expressing his gratitude and encouraging them in their work defending the dignity of women and promoting their rights. He asked that they be constantly guided by the spirit of humanity and compassion in the service of their neighbor. Welcome back. You're watching Vaticano. On May the 13th, 1981, Ali Agca failed in his assassination attempt against Pope St. John Paul II. The Pope attributed his survival to the intercession of Holy Mary, since May the 13th is the feast of Our Lady of Fatima. The Pope Saint had a close relationship with Lucia, one of the so-called shepherd children, to whom Our Lady appeared 6 times over 6 months in 1917. In preparation for the feast that marks the shepherd children's visions, these people gathered at Rome's Antonianum University to re-examine the events.
Fatima really is what we're doing here. It's the most dramatic intervention of heaven in the history of all these apparitions. A very important Marian shrine today, and the message, of course, still relevant today and still very important. So the message of Fatima is very much relevant to this. There is a call to reparation, to penance, to adoration, and really a turning back to God. And so the message is very, very profound. Sister Lucia has written a book called The Calls to explain the dynamic, if you want, of how to understand the messages from May of 1917 through October 13th, 1917, and subsequently at Tui and Pontevedra, and the call to turn to prayer, to offer sacrifice for the conversion of sinners, to pray for the Pope, and just to pray the Rosary every day.
They said the messages of Fatima apply to the world and the faith just as much today as they did 98 years ago.
The prophecy of Fatima, it really is almost like it is an analysis, if you want, of where we stand as a human race before God. For example, Our Lady says and instructs the children, and through them, because there is no conceit in them, that more souls go to hell because of sins of the flesh. And the sins of the flesh are, let's say, manifest throughout. We just have to see what's going on. The sins of the flesh are those sins, very, very serious sins. Not just adultery, there are other forms of cohabitation is sinful in the eyes of God, and the so-called movement towards same-sex, so-called marriage. This is very sinful, gravely sinful.
Today, the devotion to Our Lady of Fatima is spread across the globe, and her call to conversion is as relevant now as ever. Few months remain until the upcoming Synod for the Family in Rome. A small booklet has been published that allows to have in hand 100 questions and answers, all about the family, the Synod, and church teaching. It was presented in Rome during this small press conference. One of the groups present was the Society for the Protection of Unborn Children.
SPUC is the oldest pro-life group in the world, and we have been active at the UN for 20 years, lobbying against the anti-life, anti-family agenda of the population control.
The book is a guide for the normal lay Catholic on what the Church teaches on marriage.
Really, it is a document to address moral confusion of the faithful on what is Catholic teaching on homosexual unions, on sacramental marriage, on the reception of the Holy Eucharist by people who've been divorced and are in invalid civil unions, and so on. And it is explaining in a beautiful way, in a way I could tell my children and grandchildren. It's wonderful, good stuff, and really sets the power of Christ, the power of grace, the power of God against the power of those running the sexual revolution. It's available in several languages, certainly English and Spanish and various other languages. And I understand that they are very keen for it to be widely distributed. So I think anyone contacting filial piety, filial supplication, will be able to get a copy of this book and teach their children, teach their family, use it in schools, use it in parishes. It's brilliant.
Besides the book, the Society is also promoting a special appeal ahead of the upcoming Synod. They're collecting signatures in support of Pope Francis' efforts to defend Catholic marriage. At the end of Via della Conciliazione, the street leading away from St. Peter's Basilica, stands a unique and ancient building. Many know it for the beautiful angel statue that crowns it.
On top of Castel Sant'Angelo, we can see the Holy Archangel Michael. This statue goes back to a legend when this ancient funeral monument of the ancient emperors of Rome was turned into a papal building, or even residence, you could say, since the popes actually lived there at times. When the Pope was in a very difficult situation, when the Black Death broke out in Rome, he asked the heavenly angels for help, and on top of the castle, the Archangel Michael appeared to him.
The castle was until recent decades still a military fortress. The soldiers had special jobs in times of peace.
Castel Sant'Angelo was a mighty castle whose soldiers, cannoneers, were also in charge of the defense of Rome. But since the 17th century, this fortress and these cannoneers also became helpers in the liturgy. Castel Sant'Angelo itself became truly a liturgical element, since the cannoneers of the castle gave a salutary cannon shot on special feast days, or when Vespers was supposed to be prayed, or even during Holy Mass. Different shots according to different liturgical feasts. Additionally, they were at the service of official visits. If a head of state came, or a monarch, they likewise saluted him with a cannon shot. So the soldiers were at the service of the liturgy and ceremony. On the same street, a few steps closer to St. Peter's Basilica, the Church of the Divine Mercy is located. It too has a special connection to the cannoneers of the Angel's Castle. We see that the roof of this church is actually flat, and that there is no large bell tower attached. That was for military reasons, since this church is situated in the line of fire of Castel Sant'Angelo, and in case of war, a free line of fire was necessary and needed to be retained. This church is connected to the cannoneers also because it was the garrison church. Every year, on the feast of St. Barbara, the whole army went to Mass there. The first side chapel of the church is dedicated to St. Barbara. There, a Mass was celebrated for the cannoneers, and a wreath was put down along with other offerings for her. And obviously, a great feast followed.
Danach fand natürlich auch ein gewisses Fest statt.
Today, the line of fire is mostly enjoyed by tourists, for the exceptional view.